All right, hey everybody, so this is Josh Bruce, and today we're going to be setting up my MacBook Pro 16-inch. And man, this has been such a weird ride. So anyway, if you haven't seen the experiences video or expectations video, go ahead and take a look at that. The short version is that I've already had to send this in twice for repairs on sort of user expectation stuff. Basically that means that I've set up this MacBook Pro 16-inch like 4 or 5 times now. So kind of annoying, and still have a ticket in because I'm still getting one last thing that seems a little bit weird. But I want to show you the setup that I have because it's been sort of cultivated over the last 15 years. So I bought my first Mac in 2005. So this is more of a macOS type of review, less specific to the MacBook Pro. So there's a lot to cover. Let's jump into it. Okay, so just so you know, I haven't done anything to really change the setup of this. The only thing is from default. So the only thing that I've really done is installed OBS so that I can record stuff, and Logitech gaming software to, again, be able to record stuff. So one of the first things that I do when I get a new laptop is come up to System Preferences. For those of you who are into keyboard shortcuts, you can do Command Spacebar, which is what I normally do, and just start typing whatever it is you're looking for, and you can see it has autocomplete and that sort of a thing. So let's go into System Preferences. And what bothers me the most, and I've shown this on a couple of other videos, I think, is basically how much movement is required to get the cursor to go from left to right. So from a hardware perspective, I really don't like the large trackpad, but you know, that might be unique to me. And I do understand that if I put the cursor on the far left and then start from the far left of the trackpad and move to the far right of the trackpad, I can make it all the way across the screen in one movement. With that said, that's a lot of movement, and I would much rather, I'm not doing a lot of high precision stuff, and since it's adjustable, I can always move it back, and a lot of apps have the ability to zoom and things like that. So there's really no reason for, I believe, this rational default of tracking speed, right? So we went into System Preferences, Trackpad. I don't think there's a really good reason for this tracking speed to be this low, because it's going to require that we move our finger up and down to try to get it across the screen. And you can see that I'm doing just that. So without moving my actual hand, just moving my finger, I'm constantly moving up and down on the trackpad. So what I do is I bring it up to about 3 from the right with regard to speed. And so now what I want to be able to do is, in one movement of my finger at a certain rate of speed, I want to be able to go from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. And basically, you can sort of see that happening, right? And, you know, I don't have the top-down camera on, but, you know, take my word for it. You can turn it up to go faster. I find 3 to be pretty good, and basically I can get from one corner to the other and get where I need to go without a lot of wasted movement to make that happen. So that's like literally one of the first things that I do. So while we're on this screen, let's go ahead and change a couple of other things. Force click with one finger. So what this does is basically, if I, let's go ahead and launch Safari. We're already there. I don't even know what I was reading about the macOS. Oh, yeah, it was how to get the dock onto this screen. So I'm running a dual monitor system, the monitor that's on the laptop and then the monitor that's up here. So force click lookup, basically if I do staple and then force click it, basically click harder, it's going to bring up the lookup window, and it's basically just like bringing up Safari or something like that. And I don't like that because when I try to drag screens and things like that, a lot of times I end up doing force lookup anyway or on accident. So I would much rather do something else. So what I do is, instead of force click with one finger, I do tap with 3 fingers. And it's possible, depending on the hardware that you have, you don't actually have force click. So, you know, things like the iMac probably doesn't have force click. Basically, if you don't have a trackpad, you probably don't have force click. But now instead of using one finger to press on the trackpad and ending up, in that position of having the lookup, I can basically just tap with 3 fingers and I get that same behavior. Now it's app specific, or well, for the most part, most apps will respond this way, but there are some apps where it won't happen. So there is that. Secondary click or option click or alt click is 2 fingers. So basically I appreciate that because I usually use my index finger as the click, and then 2 fingers to tap click. I turn off tap to click, and I don't know why I think the normal default is that it's on, that tap to click is on. So just to give you an idea of what tap to click is, you actually don't have to press on the trackpad, and you can just sort of tap your finger on it lightly and it'll go. And I usually do turn this off, and mainly that's because the trackpad is so large that I do find myself accidentally clicking when like the heel of my hand or something like that touches the trackpad. You can also change how firm or light you need to press to actually click, to register it as a click on the trackpad. I usually leave it at medium. That seems to be a pretty good rational default. With that said, I believe the trackpad on the MacBook Pro is relatively stateless, so you're not actually pushing a button or anything like that. It's just moving ever so slightly, and there's a haptic feedback. So, and there's also a force click and haptic feedback, right, that you can turn off. And the trackpad feels a lot stiffer if you do that. I usually leave it on. Scroll and zoom, scroll direction natural. So this is basically you're scrolling the content, not the thumb of the scroll bar. And so I do prefer this. I think it makes a lot more sense. So basically normal, what used to be normal anyway, is that when you scrolled, you were actually controlling the thumb that's in the scroll bar. And so if you scrolled down, the thumb would move down, but the content would move up, and vice versa. Now with the natural, what they call natural scrolling, you're scrolling the content. And I find that to be much better, especially since, that's the way the iPhone, iPad, and everything else kind of works. And all the things that I'm talking about here, you can do in Windows. So like I have a Windows machine for my work, and I've modified it there too. Zoom in and out, I usually don't change that either. Smart zoom, so double tap with 2 fingers. I usually leave that alone. I don't use it much. Rotate, I don't use that much either. Swipe between pages, I usually leave that the same. Swipe between full screen apps, so this is basically changing desktops. I leave that as well, where it's basically 3 fingers swiping left and right. Notification center, I usually leave that the way that it is as well, where it's basically 2 fingers from the right edge of the trackpad. With that said, I don't use notification center because I usually turn all my notifications off, but that's more productivity stuff, and you can go to joshbruce.com to check that stuff out. Mission control, swiping up with 3 fingers. I usually leave that the way it is. App exposé, they've actually made this no longer a default. So what app exposé used to be, or what it is basically, let's go ahead and turn it on. If you have 2 windows that are open for Safari and you swipe with 3 fingers down, it will not do what Mission Control does. So what Mission Control does is it takes all the windows on the desktop, so System Preferences and the 2 Safari windows, and it shows those. Whereas App Exposé basically isolates the single app that is active, and you can see all the windows for it. And there's only ever one System Preferences, so that's why App Exposé only shows that. I do find this to be beneficial, even though I do use a lot of tabs, and we'll get to that later. Merge all windows. Launchpad, so this is basically how you get to your apps. It's a pinch with thumb and 3 fingers. I leave that the way it is. I try to maintain as much of the rational defaults as I can. That way, every time I update, 1, I'm not spending a whole bunch of time changing things. But 2, if I go to someone else's device, I haven't completely changed the way I work or my workflow so that I can actually help them as well, right? Because I do productivity coaching. So second shameless plug for joshbruce.com. And then you have show desktop. That's one I actually do use a lot because for me, my most active folder is the desktop, and it's usually very cluttered with stuff. So that's it for trackpad. Again, that's sort of the big stuff that I change, and it's mainly so that I can start moving faster with the cursor. And speaking of moving faster with the cursor, for whatever reason, the dock is just flooded with crap when you first launch. And if you don't know the gestures, I get it. If you're a strict like point and click navigator of your computer, makes a lot of sense. I've gone to the far extreme of basically having nothing in the dock except the trash can and Finder. And I've also gone to having all the apps and then leaving the recents on. Like I've done a lot of iterations of this over the years. And basically what I find is sort of that happy medium ground. So Launchpad, we have a gesture for that. I know it, I use it. I don't need to have the Launchpad icon down there. I do try to divide my dock up into like communication, browsing, that sort of a thing. And so basically the browser should be farther to the right. So with mail, I usually leave mail here or leave it in the dock. Even though I don't launch, for the most part, I don't launch things from the dock. But if I'm trying to navigate one-handed, point and click is a lot easier than trying to bring this up and type out mail, right? So there's that. So communication comes first. So we're going to bring FaceTime over. I do leave that in the dock now. I didn't used to. And then messages is also communication. So we're going to bring that over. And basically you can see we basically have long form text, short form text, and audio video. Maps, I'm not going to launch it from here. I'm going to use Spotlight. Photos, I'll use Spotlight. Contacts, I'll use Spotlight. Calendar, I do use. I put that, so this is basically it goes communication, productivity, and then browsing. So the calendar, I do use the calendar. The reminders app, I do use that as well. The notes app, I use pretty extensively. Music, the music app, I launch from Spotlight when I need to. Same with podcasts. Same with the Apple TV. Same with Apple News. Same with numbers. And we can go ahead and quit Keynote. I'm going to remove that as well. Remove pages. So that's all the iWork stuff. Basically, again, I'm going to launch most of those from Spotlight. Same thing with the App Store. Same thing with system preferences. Whoa. Oh, I can't because it's open. So all your open apps are going to be in the dock, whether you want them to be or not. All right, so one of the things that I don't like is the recent apps. So, that's what this grouping is here. I mean, I appreciate it. I can see how other people would appreciate it. It's not for me though, because I want my dock to be effectively empty. Like I don't want to become more dependent on the dock. I want to use other means because I think the dock is relatively slow, especially when we get to hiding it. So if we come up to the dock, let's go ahead and start messing with things here. So we can change the size of the dock, right? And you can do it through system preferences, but there's actually a faster way. If you just kind of go on the dock itself, the vertical bars, you can sort of just scroll up and get it to the size that you like. I actually like it to be very, very small. With that said, when I hover over it, I do turn magnification on. So basically now I've got these really large icons. But I don't really want them to be that large. So let's scale that back a bit, right? And so now I can get across the dock with less movement. With that said, it's also kind of pretty much out of the way when I stop hovering over it. So that's good. Now let's see, position, I stick with the bottom. Again, I don't like to customize my stuff because I'm always working on other people's stuff too. And it really sucks when they customize it. So you have the genie effect and the scale effect. The genie effect basically is what makes it look like it's a genie going into a bottle. And you can bring up your minimized windows this way. Then you have the scale effect, which basically just makes the window smaller. It's a faster animation, but I leave that alone. Prefer tabs when opening documents in full screen only. I actually set this to always. And that way I just kind of get out of the whole like multiple window thing, unless I actually want to have a separate window. Like sometimes when I pay my bills, I don't want to have all these tabs. Instead, I want to have a separate window with its own set of tabs and everything like that, that I can then sign in where I need to and pay the bills. But by default, I like them all to sort of be in one spot. Double click a Windows title bar, and that's zoom. So I don't even know what this means. I don't really use it. Minimize windows into application icon. So what this will do is it will actually, when you minimize the window, instead of it coming over here, it will be inside of the icon. I don't like that. I'd much rather see the individual windows that I'm minimizing, because again, I might have multiple windows in Safari open, but they might be minimized and I want to be able to open just one. Animate opening applications. So that basically, when you open an application, it will appear in the dock and start to bounce up and down. I usually leave that alone. Then I turn on automatically hide and show the dock. So, you know, basically whenever I need the dock, I just come down here, it shows up and it starts to magnify, and that's pretty good. Show indicators for open applications. That's basically the dot on the bottom of the icon, and I usually leave that on. Show recent applications in the dock. I usually turn this off. And so now you can see like OBS, QuickTime, and that sort of thing. They're open, but they're not over here, right? And so if I actually quit out of QuickTime, the icon goes away. And I can't quit out of OBS because we're using it to record, right? So that's setting up the dock. So again, you can see pretty minimal dock. And as soon as I close out of all these things, it'll get even less icons and that sort of a deal. Now, I will say, since when we talked about in the expectations video, we did talk about iCloud and how long it takes for iCloud Drive to catch up. So basically, I am on the 3 terabyte plan. I've used almost a terabyte, looks like. And this took, from the other video, we basically only had desktop and documents when we first showed up. I recommended that we should be able to see all of it, but maybe it's grayed out and with an icon that shows that it's being downloaded or something, or that content is being downloaded. But basically this took 12 to 24 hours, I think, to populate and have everything inside of it. So, so not too bad. All right. Oh, actually, since we had Finder open, I was in the right place. I like to rearrange the Finder tabs, or not the tabs, but the sidebar. And the reason that I do this is because of my productivity strategy. We can talk about that later if you want. And what I do is I'm going to move iCloud up to the top because it's going to take precedent. And when I do maintenance on my files and folders, I usually just start from the top and go to the bottom. And so, like I said, the desktop is my most volatile folder. So basically, when I start doing my maintenance, I can just click on the desktop, go through top to bottom, and clean everything out that I need to clean out and that sort of a thing. Same thing with the documents folder. So I go into documents, I do the same thing, make sure stuff is in the right place. I'm not missing any folders. There aren't extraneous folders that I need to delete, that sort of a thing. And then of course you can go into iCloud Drive, and desktop and documents is there as well, but I can also check the downloads folder, which I don't use because I set my browsers to put downloads into the desktop. And so if I see files inside of here, I know I can pretty much delete them. I can also go into IA Writer, see what's there, different applications, see what I've stored there, make sure that it's in the right place, or put it where it needs to be. For the most part, I do not use recents, not in the dock and not in that app folder. Since I don't use the downloads folder, I'm going to go ahead and remove that as well. And then what I do want to do is I actually do want to edit and add things. So I do like to have the status bar, which is what causes this bottom part to show up, where it's like 284 items. And when I click on iCloud Drive, it's the part that says 18 items. This is how much space is used. that sort of a thing. So looks like I did go ahead and do that, but the rational default is that it's not there because it's a cleaner design, I guess. And you can also turn on show path bar, which basically means like if I click on something, it'll show me the entire path of where that thing is in whatever root folder it's in. I usually don't do that here, so let's go ahead and do that. You can customize the touch bar. I'm fine, just leave it the way it is. Again, I don't try to customize a lot of things. You can customize the toolbar. We might do that, but there's some handy things. Oh yes, I am going to do that. So you can also just right click or alt click and customize toolbar. And one of the things that I always add is the new folder button, because I like to be able to rapidly sort of delete and add folders, and I don't think there's a keyboard shortcut for create new folder. Nope, there is. Shift Command N. So maybe I'll try to commit that one to memory. So anyway, show view options, window. Let's go to show view options. So I have a tendency to prefer column view. That is not the default view. It's usually thumb view. So basically thumb view looks like this. And list view looks like this. I don't like that because of the carrots, but if that's how you want to roll, by all means. I do prefer the column view because it just sort of keeps stacking itself to the right, and I can always go back a certain level. It's kind of like one of the only reasons that I think breadcrumbs are useful. Then you also have what's called cover flow. I do appreciate cover flow from the concept that it's a preview and like automatically has the preview there for you. And you know, it's large and you can interact with it. What I don't like is that it's this sort of horizontal list. And I've done all sorts of stuff with regard to organization and trying to make this thing work. This used to be, Coverflow used to be a list view. Like it used to be underneath it, it wasn't thumbnails, it was a list view. But anyhow, so I always say, no, not open in gallery view. There we go. So go into column view, always open in column view, browse in column view. I also have a tendency to group by kind, so that will put all of the folders together, all of the documents, all of the images, and that sort of a thing. But default is name, I think. And that's, I usually leave that the way it is, but then in documents, again, you might have to do this for every single one. I think it's kind of annoying. There are some terminal things that you can do to make this just the way life is, but I usually don't mess with them. Show preview column, yes. Show icon preview, yes. And show icons, yes, right? So that's just show view options, right? Trying to think, is there, oh, yeah. I thought there was an easier way to do this, but maybe not. So another thing that I like to do is I like to get my home folder on here as well. And I usually just put that at the top and leave applications and AirDrop sort of at the bottom. There's a public folder, so I have 2 accounts on my computer, and basically, or I will have 2 accounts on my computer, and so the public folder lets me sort of create a pass-through, and it's just easier for me to have that in Finder. Then let's see, anything else? I usually put photos in there as well, so let's go ahead and, yeah, so pictures. So now I can like hop into pictures, see my photo library, see what else is there. And again, the idea here is, from a maintenance perspective, is be able to go from the most volatile place, the thing that's going to get the most action, clean that up first, and then go to the places that have less like increasingly less activity. So this actually probably makes more sense where public is more is higher. Now, there was a time where I went through and did basically a folderless structure. So there were no folders whatsoever. And I started using tags pretty extensively. So you can see personal, professional, eightfold pros. And I thought it was nice from the perspective that I could, just click on these tags and the folders. It was an interesting way to kind of do smart folders. But I don't really use the tags too much anymore. So I'll probably clean those up the next time I do maintenance stuff. All right, so what else? No, let's go into system preferences. And I'm just going to kind of speed through this unless I can think of something. Oh, internet accounts. So this is more for one of the Apple tickets that I have going on. So you can see that basically I've got 1, 2, 3, and then 4 email accounts, right? Shouldn't that be 5? Yeah, this one, because I'm still deprecating. All right, so there we go. We've got this going on for ourselves, and with that said, if I actually launch mail, hopefully there's nothing too incriminating. I get to see it first. That's great. We can sort of see my email accounts kind of populating, and it has to download a bunch of messages and that sort of a thing. So we'll let that kind of work itself on the background. But if you notice, we have eightfold main, and it's showing up as a mailbox down here, and so is the Gmail deprecated, right? Now inside of the inbox, we also have Experience Design, which is not a Gmail account. We also have Productive Agility, which is not a Gmail account. And we have My Personal, which is not a Gmail account. And instead of it being this sort of smartly separated out mailbox down here, it stays up here, and I basically have to remove the accounts and bring them back. But I'm going to go ahead and let the messages keep downloading, and we're going to minimize that. We could also hide it, but I'm going to minimize it because it should keep working. Yeah, because it's not hindered by AppNap. We'll find out. So what else do we change? I have a tendency to change a lot of the notifications. I usually change them as they're coming in, just to kind of see what notifications am I getting, and do I actually want them? And for the most part, I turn off 90% of them. So, email will check itself every, in fact, while we're doing that, might as well. So let's go into the mail preferences. I don't want to play sounds for any of the mail actions. I don't want to play a new message sound. Check for new messages automatically. I restrict it to every 5 minutes. Doc unread count, inbox only. New message notification, inbox only. Yeah, that's fine. Downloads folder, change that to the desktop. Remove unedited downloads after message is deleted. Yep. Archive or delete. I've never muted a message, so we're fine. Add invitations to calendar automatically. Don't want to do that. I don't like to automate my calendar very much. Automatically try sending later if outgoing server is unavailable. Prefer opening messages in split view when in full screen. Yes. Use the trash folder. Great. And you can see that all of my accounts are considered active or online. But again, we don't have the other 3 accounts showing up in the lower lists. Got that. Yeah, leave that as default stuff for junk mail. Leave that as default stuff. And it's really interesting when people talk about like how you can't customize the experience for this but you totally can. I just tend not to, and I think a lot of users tend not to. So viewing, I think we're good. Oh, list preview. So for the list preview, I do try to set it to 5 lines, and that's because for a lot of stuff, you can actually see the content enough to know, okay, I don't want to open that, right? And so that's good. Composing, yeah, that's fine. Signatures, I have some here. I don't usually use them though. And it does look like the mail rules came over, but they're all turned off. So let's go ahead and turn those back on. Ooh, this reminds me, and I think I can do it here. So let's switch gears for just a second. And I think, is it on the keyboard? Yeah. So keyboard, going to system preferences, keyboard shortcuts, and down here there's a checkbox that says use keyboard navigation to move focus between controls. So if I tap on that and see how it's got this focus ring around this button, I can actually tab to move between things, right? And so this allows me to use the keyboard to actually navigate screens. So in theory, I should be able to now, and I don't know if, let's test this real quick. Could I do that even if I didn't have this? No. All right, so I'm hitting the space bar and I'm not checking that. Turn use keyboard navigation to change focus, and it starts to feel more like a web page because it's accessibility controls, right? So hit the space bar down, hit the space bar down, and missed one. I can't go up. That's ridiculous. So let's go ahead and just turn all these on. And this is another productivity thing. And again, we can talk about it over on joshbruce.com if you want to. And just let me know. And I will definitely talk about all the productivity things that I do to basically make life easy for myself. So now, you know, we're done, and I can basically, I will say one of the things I do like about the add rule is that it sort of comes up with a default. And if you select, if you have like an email selected, like if I had this one from Google, it would pre-populate for you. So if from contains this, like, so it's real easy to make rules in the mail app. So anyway, that's all, you know, turned on. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command A, which selects all my email messages, and I'm going to say apply rules. And so you can see that it dropped by about 2 dozen, right? And that's because by default, the mail rules are not being applied, at least on this machine. And I'm not sure what the rationale was behind that decision or any of Apple's decisions because I don't work for Apple. So it's still downloading messages, and we can see that the mail, you know, my other mail accounts are still not there, which is fine, I guess. Let's see, let's kind of go through, you know, I've changed the colors and customized the colors before. It's not that big of a deal to me, so I'm not going to worry about it. I think the rational defaults for showing and hiding scroll bars is fine. I am going to go ahead and begin the process of setting up Brave, because I do use the Brave browser. So let's do this. Download Brave for macOS. Allow that download. It shouldn't take too long. And I do, you know, this setting it to auto for dark mode was something that was part of the onboarding process. So I've already set that. Since I automatically hide the dock, and I'm now doing a lot more screencast things, I also hide the menu bar. All right, so now I have this like completely clear kind of screen. So that's nice. Let's go back, desktop screensaver. I don't think I changed anything here. You know, the fact that it gives us like 50,000 ways to set dark mode and which background we have and that sort of a thing is kind of interesting to me. But anyhow, already did the doc. Mission control. So with mission control, one of the first things I do is I take out automatically rearrange spaces based on most recent use. And the reason that I do that is because let's create another space up here and another space up here. Whoops. Where'd you go? Right, so if we come over here and we go, we've got mail, right? And then we go to Safari, which is in the middle. Oh no, let's go here. Sorry. So we're gonna go to the desktop 2, which is technically desktop 1 on this monitor, then go to mail, right? Now all of a sudden, what was desktop 4 is now desktop 3 because it automatically rearranges itself. So let's go ahead and put things back the way they were. I'm going to unclick automatically rearrange spaces. I'm going to go to desktop 4, and then I'm going to slide over to Safari, and then slide over to desktop 2, and go back to desktop 4, go back to desktop 2, and you can see mail stays in desktop 4. And the reason that I do that is because I was around when Spaces was like a grid, and basically I really like the gestures of being able to go between screens. I really like the idea of being able to go up and down, but mission control makes that not possible. But you know, being able to go left and right, and I know which desktop has what. And the reason I know that is because, well, what I end up doing is I put all my communication stuff on the first desktop. So I'll actually do like options where it says assign to. Instead of assign to all desktops, it would be desktop on display 1, desktop on display 2, basically saying always open this app here. And so this space, right, so going into mission control, this space, this far left space becomes my communication space. Then my next space over becomes sort of the web browser kind of vibe, right? That's where my web browsing is. Even when I'm doing development, web development and stuff like that, this is where my browsers launch. Then, and I also put my FTP stuff and things like that here. And then in the other one, I will actually put my code. And so basically I can do some coding stuff, come over here, refresh the browser, and keep switching back and forth. And that way it just minimizes how many windows I have. Again, joshbruce.com, we can talk about that stuff if you want to. Group windows by application, no. This basically means that when you're in mission control, any application, all the windows for a specific application will actually be grouped together. And the reason that I usually don't do that is because I want to be able to see the whole window so that I know exactly which one I'm opening. Like there's been occasions where I thought I was clicking on the right one and I wasn't. So I don't need that. Sorry, setting up also requires me to basically reset OBS as well. So anyway, group windows by application, nope, I'm good. Displays have separate spaces. I do leave that clicked, it's fine. And what that means is that basically when I switch spaces up here, it's not switching spaces down on the laptop. And let's see, I don't do anything with Siri, but if we wanted to activate enable ask Siri, which I'm not going to do yet, we could. Don't do anything in there. I don't do anything usually in language and region. Internet accounts, this is the big one because this is the one that seems to have the most issues around it. Wallet, I could set up Apple Pay. I usually set it up as I'm going through and trying to buy stuff. Multiple fingerprints, so basically I'll probably add 1 or 2 more fingerprints and 1 or 2 from like one of my handlers or something. And users and groups, setting up that if you want to. Accessibility, do I turn any of the accessibility stuff on? I don't think so. I was playing with some of the accessibility features when I first started doing screencasts and stuff like that, but I usually don't. do anything with it now. Screen time, don't really do stuff there. Security and privacy, don't do anything there, at least not part of the setup. Bluetooth, not really. Keyboard, trackpad, already did that. Don't have a mouse. Displays. So displays, if you have multiple monitors, basically this is for the laptop, and then this is for the display that we're working on. You can see that I force it back down to 720. And that's just because that's what the output resolution is going to be. And I want to be interacting with what you're going to be seeing. And it gives us a larger font. But meanwhile, on the actual laptop itself, it looks, you can see where it says underneath the laptop, this looks like 2048 by 1280. And that's usually what I use. Arrangement, I have the external monitor on the left. So basically, because that's where it's perceptive, from a perception perspective, that's where it is. And I do try to at least put it on the side that it's perceived to be on. Don't play anything with that. Don't play around with night shift. Energy saver. Okay, sidecar. I don't have an iPad. I did try sidecar for a while. I didn't appreciate it enough to keep going. And so now, basically what I'll do a lot of times is when it comes to battery power, I will change this to like 3 minutes instead of 1 or 2. I will up the power adapter to 20. And so this is a good time to explain that keyboard focus thing. So may use more energy, blah, blah, blah. If I hit the space bar, the button that has the focus is going to be the one that gets pressed, right? And so if I wanted to cancel this, I could actually tab to change focus and then hit the space bar. Now, with the way that UI works in macOS is you'll have a primary action, and that primary action is tied to the enter key. So if I hit enter, then we'll basically accept the changes and the warning and dismiss it. You can also change focus and use the space bar if you want to, but we'll hit enter. One of the other things that I have a tendency to do when I'm recording and editing video and things like that is basically I will turn off automatic graphics switching. So this is another one of those things where it's like when it's on, what it's going to do is that if it doesn't need to use the Radeon GPU that I bought, that that 8 gig separate GPU that I have, it'll use the Intel on chip graphics. And unfortunately, or what it seems like to me, is that the stuff that I do teeters so close on the fulcrum that basically I don't get consistent output from recording videos and things like that. So basically by turning off automatic graphics switching, I know that I'm always using the high performance chipset, and yeah, I just don't even think about it. And of course you can turn the battery status in the menu bar off. So that changes to energy saver, date and time. I don't really mess with that. Sharing, don't really mess with that. Time machine, I actually do have a time capsule still, so I'll probably set that up later. And startup disk, right? Like I don't touch most of this stuff. And then with Apple ID, yeah, I don't mess too much with that either, but I do get a lot of warnings now that basically say you need to update your Apple ID settings. So speaking of which, when it comes to accounts, right? So we can see nothing's downloading anymore, but we still, or rather, there we go. It's doing things, but we can still see that our email accounts are not there. So let's go ahead and switch over, grab system preferences, come over here. And if I come into internet accounts, and don't worry about the Gmail ones, right? Because they seem to work just fine. I can't just turn the account off. I've tried this with multiple calls to Apple support. And so basically what I have to do is remove it from all and then put it back. So it's going to be a mail account. It's basically using DreamHost. So imap dreamhost.com, or rather this is the email address. So which one is this? This one is going to be joshbruce.dev. And then Magica Television, So we get an error message because, well, we can't sign in. It can't sign in. So incoming, we do imap dreamhost.com. So it's really easy. Outgoing, it's smtp dreamhost.com, I believe. So now we're going to do sign in, and we're just going to do mail, so no notes. And poof, there it is. Or whoop, there it is, depending on where you're coming from with that. But we can see now it doesn't have the same name. It doesn't have what it used to. So I have to come over here and basically come into Josh Bruce and say this is for XDWJB. And or what did I call it? I think I called it like experience design or something. So now I have to rename the account, which is, yeah, okay, whatever. But again, it moves it down here. So now let's do the same thing with my personal account. Giving out all my email addresses, which is fine because I give out all my email addresses anyway. So it's just a mail account. So we're going to do josh@joshuabruce.com, magic of television. Again, can't sign in, so we put in our IMAP stuff, SMTP, sign in, just mail, done, and poof, voila, there it is with all of the folders underneath it, right? And just to make sure that we're demonstrating what this does, remove from all, mail, josh@joshbruce.com, magic of television, imap.dreamhost.com, smtp.dreamhost.com. Oh, yeah, just notes, done. And poof, all of a sudden, there they are. Then hop into mail preferences. So this is joshbruce.com. So this is going to be productive agility. And you might be able to hear that this keyboard is actually quieter than the butterfly. And again, I think I mentioned this in one of the other videos, but part of that is because I'm just used to having the smaller throw, at least in my estimation. Part of it is that I'm just used to having the smaller throw of the butterfly keyboard. So I'm not trying to travel as far, and so I'm not banging on the keys. But even then, like it does seem like it's part of the design itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rearrange these accounts to more of how they actually get used. Again, going from most volatile to least volatile. Or most desired, I guess would be a better way of saying that. So we have Eightfold, which is my company, and then we have Experience Design, which is this channel and content. So joshbruce.dev, and then Productive Agility, which is joshbruce.com, and then Personal, which is joshuabruce.com, and then Gmail, which is getting deprecated. And you can see we did all that while still downloading messages and whatnot. And if we come into the inbox, you can see that it's no longer showing these accounts as with this caret to basically have folders underneath them. So now it is a clean inbox and everything. So yeah, that's it, I think, for most of my setup. So let's go ahead and switch back to the face cam. All right, so there you have it. That's my face, or this is my face. That's my setup for macOS and the apps that I use that come with macOS, right? So I didn't download any of the other applications that I use or anything like that. It is literally just the setup that I use to operate in the Apple ecosystem, right, of applications. And so, I mean, I did download Brave, but that kind of is what it is. I just didn't want to forget to do that. So definitely, I think the two biggest things that make it a better experience, at least in my book, is that tracking speed on the trackpad. I showed that to one person and they gave me the biggest hug ever. I did this as a live stream on Twitch at one point, and one of the participants was like, I just changed that tracking speed thing. Thank you so much. So that tracking speed thing is just such a big deal, and really why my biggest argument or the biggest argument I have against the big honkin' trackpad. The other big one for me is rearranging the folders. So basically it becomes really easy for me to maintain my system because I'm just going from top to bottom. So highest priority item to lowest priority item. So that's sort of the things that make it a better experience from my perspective. And things that I would still classify as sort of buggy, or that we could do for an improved experience that are just beyond our control, is when you're setting up a new laptop and you have iCloud and use iCloud, go ahead and use like the P list or whatever you have at your disposal, Apple, to populate, but in a disabled fashion. Because I cannot tell you the number of times I've called up Apple support and been like, hey, where's my stuff, right? And I'm just like, because I'm getting no feedback as a user. I'm getting no feedback that something is actually happening. I have to take it on faith that something's happening in the background. And so just having that list of stuff that's there, and double checking that immediately when we get there, I think would be a much better experience. Improved capability or improved integration with with just like regular email accounts, I think would be better too, because I shouldn't have to remove my accounts from every device I have, which at this point is like the 2017 15-inch, the 2019 16-inch, the iPhone, an iPod Touch. I'm testing out an iPhone SE, right? Like I have this stuff on everything. And all I'm going to do is remove it and then come back and put it back in. So, something's going on there as well. I do appreciate that it didn't take as long as it has in the past for all the iCloud stuff to catch up with us, because in the past it has taken 24, 48, sometimes even 72 hours for it to catch up with us setting things up. But yeah, so that's the setup that I use, and I've been using that specific setup for at least the last 5 years, and some of that stuff I've been using for over a decade. And it's literally the first things that I come in and do. I really wish Apple would also sort of bump up that tracking speed, that rational default for the tracking speed, because I think as Apple users, we kind of get really accustomed to the rational defaults just feeling like a really good experience. And I don't know what got us to the point that having that tracking speed that slow was like what became the rational default, right? Like I should be able to move farther than an inch in one finger swipe. That seems rational. Now, if I start using a lot of photo editing software and want to have like really, really fine grained control with the distance, maybe just tell people about it more often, because I literally like got a hug. I cannot stress this enough. I'm literally watching a user get frustrated at the trackpad because he's never used a MacBook before. And based on my, thoughts and recommendations, because he said, I'm thinking about getting a MacBook. And I said, okay, well, what are you looking to do? And he went out and got the Air, and I'm like, how are you enjoying it? He's like, I appreciate it. I like it a lot. But I could see the face that he was making as he's like trying to just rapidly go from one corner of the desktop to the other. And I was like, can I show you something? And he said, absolutely. And so we went into system preferences, the trackpad. I changed the tracking speed. I said, now try to move it just however, like the way you naturally move, just try to move it. And he moved it. And he literally hugged me, like hugged me. First, it was like one shoulder and he's shaking me. And, he's like from Austria or something. I can't remember, Belarus. He's just like shaking me. He's like, this is great. And then he like puts his other arm around me. He's like, that's so wonderful. Right? Like, I'm not even kidding. Like this, I'm not being hyperbolic. If you want a letter from him, I can probably get that to happen. But basically, like that tracking speed is so tight that it's like, of course I need a trackpad that's as big as the screen, right? But you don't. So anyway, with that said, as always, thank you so much for making the time. and I'll see you around.